I'm just a boy from Kansas out to save the world from chronic disease. And I truly mean that. Nobody is in control of your health but you. I can't heal you. Your doctor can't heal you. You have to heal you. And it's all about having the education and empowerment to know what you need to be changing within yourself, within your life, to set your soul free and accomplish that best life that we all like to talk about. And I truly believe that the greatest medicine of all is to teach people how not to need it. I'm Brendan Vermeyer, the original Holistic Savage. Welcome to the Holistic Savage podcast. Benazati, welcome to the Holistic Savage podcast, where we like to talk about all things functional medicine, functional fitness, functional spirituality, and functional psychology, just holistic health in general. You know, I think it really requires all the above to help people reach optimal health. And super excited to have you on the show. I consider you kind of a brother across the nation and universe here, and certainly you're doing amazing things. I see you out there, and I love what you say about putting a dent in disease. You know, and you're educating the masses on keto is your big thing. And certainly today, the ketogenic diet has become massive. And so I'm excited to dive into keto and talking about that, because something I really respect about you is, you know, as we all know, you know, functional medicine or holistic health or diet or all these things, highly individualized. You know, there is no one size fits all. And so certainly we're always going to have, you know, sensationalized bandwagons of diet. Like we always have, we always will, you know, whether it's the Atkins craze or the paleo craze or the now keto is the big thing. And so obviously anytime something gets sensationalized, you know, there's going to be good practices, bad practices, and everything in between. And so that's where I love what I see with you, because you're teaching people how to do keto right and do it intelligently and understand all the multifactorial science. So anyways, first and foremost, thanks for joining me. And secondly, I'd love to hear a little bit about why you're so passionate about keto, and we'll dive in, have some fun.
Yeah, I'm honored to be here. I love what you're doing, and you are a brother of mine, a mentor, a great friend, a brother, and we're on this mission that's much more than just us here on planet Earth, in the universe, to educate the world. Which, let's face it, there's a lot of people hurting, a lot of people sick, and a lot of bad information out there. So the work that you do, the work that I do, it's so important. And I love that we're on this conversation together, because now we can get it out to both of our communities.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, you crushed it on my podcast. So go listen to that. It's actually coming out this Monday. So by the time they listen to this episode, it'll be out. Keto Camp podcast with Brendan, the holistic savage himself. So why am I so passionate about keto? Well, health in general, but keto is one of the tools in the toolbox. Well, most of my life, Brendan, as you know, I was actually obese for a large portion of my life. I was overweight, obese, 80 pounds heavier than I am today. Up until the age of 24, that's what my life was like. So I tell people I was physically obese and I was mentally obese, which was just as bad as being physically obese, probably worse. And I was just tiptoeing my way through life, hoping to make it safely to death's door. I was awake in the definition of my heart was beating, but I was not alive. I was not living a life of purpose. I was not focusing on my health. My priorities were shot, and I was addicted to video games, addicted to drugs, addicted to bad relationships, and my life was just spiraling out of control. That was in my teenage years, and that led all the way up until my early adulthood, and I followed a standard American diet. My mom worked at Kentucky Fried Chicken as a manager or assistant manager, and she brought me Kentucky Fried Chicken every day. So she was doing the best that she can, immigrated from Iran, and it manifested in the way I felt, my thoughts, my physical appearance. And when I reached 24 years old, that's when I hit rock bottom. My ex-girlfriend broke up with me. We were together for about 4 years, and she left the relationship, rightfully so, was going nowhere. And I was working at a packing and shipping store, which is so funny because I'm in this area in Miami, Bay Harbor Islands, Florida, Miami Beach area. And I worked at a packing and shipping store literally down the street from where I'm living right now. So I was a manager there, but it was a dead-end job, not inspiring. I would just want to finish from 9 to 5, go home and play video games all night. And I was 250 pounds, 24 years old, and I was just lost in life. So I was depressed at this point in my life. Girlfriend broke up with me, had no purpose, never focused on my health, and I wanted to end my life. I was
Mm,
actually tired of suffering. Uh, every time I was in a room by myself, I would have really bad thoughts of ending my life. I was just so tired of hurting and crying every day. So I had to kind of surround myself with friends so they could distract me from those thoughts. And I actually did go on the internet and look for ways to kill myself. I
mm,
was in such a bad place that I was looking for ways to kill myself. But I thought about my mother every time I did that, and I didn't want to do that to my mother, so it
mm,
stopped me. So I was so lost, depressed, sad, and confused with what I wanted to do in life. 24 years old, and then enter what you see behind me here: books. I started to read books from authors like Wayne Dyer and Bob Proctor, and just amazing authors, and it really opened up a whole new world to me. And I finally, for the first time in my life, Brendan, took responsibility for the results I got in my life. First time I took ownership over my life. Fast forward 9 months from that moment, I went from 250 pounds to 170 pounds. I went from 34% body fat to 6% body fat, size 38 waist to size 30. And more importantly than achieving a physical six pack for the first time in my life, I carved out a mental six pack. And I think that's more
mm.
important than a physical six pack any time of the day. And that's what started me off on my journey. That was back in 2009, and it really just opened up a whole new world to me. And fast forward to today, it's doing a lot of work in the health space.
Dude, thank you so much for sharing. It's you said a lot of really remarkable things right there, and what a hell of a way to start what's going to be an awesome convo. Because certainly I'm excited to discuss keto with the keto man himself. But I love how we're starting it with really more talking about kind of functional psychology and functional spirituality, and talking about that rock bottom, talking about that ownership, right? Because certainly a lot of people that do start doing some kind of diet, all right, well, why are they doing that? Obviously they're thinking that this diet or this exercise regimen or this supplement or whatever it is, they're looking externally to remedy an internal void, an internal trauma, and kind of sense of inadequacy or whatever it is. And so certainly it's like, okay, well, before we start talking about the technicalities of who's keto, what, who should or should not do keto or how they should do it, it's like, but what's the why, and what's the experience there? And, so many things you said, like, I didn't know some of that about you. And it's very similar to, a lot of my path where, hey, I started my career scrubbing toilets and folding towels at the gym that I just got home from, or I had a self-induced near-death experience from horrible depression and all of that. And so then here we are now, like you doing what you're doing, me doing what I'm doing. And it really comes down to that. Yeah, I love what you said about the mental six pack, right? Certainly our world and society, yeah, there is a lot of obsession around aesthetics and all of that. We all know that. But what I love about what's going on now, there is a lot more kind of an awakening going on, it seems, through the internet, where you see a lot more talk about unconditional self-love, and you see a lot more about the mental game, because it's like, I mean, it doesn't necessarily matter as much about what you do so much as how you do it and why you're doing it. So pretty remarkable. And so certainly, I'd love to hear, what were some of the things that helped you take that self-ownership and do that introspection? And then obviously we'll get into like, okay, so then why keto and how keto worked for you?
Yeah, great question. Great topic of discussion, because you're right. I could talk about what to eat on keto, what not to eat on keto, how to practice fasting, all the nuts and bolts. But if you don't have the right mindset and the right inner size, then
Hmm.
you won't get everything that you want from keto and fasting. It's weird because what motivated me at the time was getting my girlfriend to see what she missed out on, right?
Mm, mm,
And that's not lasting, and it wasn't lasting, but that was my initial motivation. I'll show her. I'm going to get a six pack. I'll show her what she's missing out on. And I think motivation is great. I think it should be a daily dose every single day, but motivation doesn't last. And you have to figure out your why, which is what you said. Why do you want to get a six pack? Why do you want to be healthier? Where is it showing up right now in your life? So asking those questions and peeling back the layers, that's more important than short-term motivation. I like inspiration more than motivation, and there's a difference there. So the first few months was all motivation. I just wanted to get back at my ex-girlfriend, wanted to get a six-pack for the first time in my life. I was always that kid who was bullied and picked on growing up, the fat kid who never had a girlfriend. So I had very low confidence, and my motivation was to get a six-pack and get confidence. Like, that was my mindset back then. And I realized that through my journey, it's much more important for me to actually be healthy and have vitality in my relationships with my thoughts. And then I could share that and share what I did with my community, with my friends, and make an impact with them. But I didn't really get it, Brendan, until I saw my father get sick. So this is after my transformation. I didn't do it the right way. Like when I went through my weight loss transformation, yeah, I got lean, but I wouldn't say I was that healthy. I followed whatever I learned in Men's Health magazine, right? That was my advice. Portion control every 2 to 3 hours. So I had leaky gut, I had acne, I had a lot of inflammation, but I was lean. So there's a distinction there. Health is not always, there's a lot of fit, sick people out there, and I was one of them.
Yeah.
And I know you see it a lot too. So it wasn't until I saw my father get really sick after my transformation. He had type 2 diabetes, which we know is a lifestyle disease that's treated with medication. And he had it for most of my life. So I remember taking my father to his appointments, his doctor's appointments, before I really understood the disease. I would take him to his appointments. They would prescribe his medication, his insulin, and then tell me what to get for him at the grocery store. So then after that, we would go, and every single week I'd take him to the grocery store, and I would buy him what they recommended, which was like Fiber One bars, Gatorade, Zero Gatorade, whatever it was called, the sugar-free Gatorade. Sometimes they would say, have some Krispy Kreme donuts in hand in case his glucose gets too low. And I followed that approach because I didn't really understand the disease. And I watched my father's health get worse and worse and worse over the years. He got bigger and fatter. And then I asked the doctor once, you're saying that if my dad lost weight, it would help with his type 2 diabetes, correct? And they said yes. And then I asked, but you're prescribing him insulin. Doesn't that cause him to gain weight? And they said that's just the way it works. That's just the way it goes. It's how it's treated. And I accept that. And this is a lesson here because I didn't really question that or challenge that notion from the doctor. And my dad ended up getting diabetic neuropathy, really bad, to the point where he could barely walk. The nerves in his feet were just so damaged. And he called me one day and he said he couldn't even walk to the bathroom. He couldn't even get up without holding onto the wall. So me and my mother drove him to the hospital, drove him to the ER. And he was so worried in that emergency room about getting his feet amputated, because we know that's the next step. If you don't do something about it, they want to chop off that foot so it doesn't go gangrene and get infected. He knew about that, and he was so stressed out in the hospital, in the emergency room, that he suffered a massive stroke in the hospital, and they didn't even catch it. I walked in the next day and I said, hey, something's up with my dad. He's not speaking anymore. And they ran tests and said, your father suffered a massive stroke, and he lost the ability to speak. He lost the entire right side of his body to function. He couldn't move. And he essentially got transferred to a hospice. For 9 months, I watched my father every single week, his body shrink before my eyes. 9 months. And I went to go visit him on August 12th, 2014. It was a Monday night, and he was in the worst shape that I had ever seen him, Brendan. He was throwing up on himself. He was just so hopeless, convulsing. And I remember it like it was yesterday. And I walked up to him after they cleaned him up, and he looked a lot better. And I said that I loved him. I told him that he was my father. I'm always going to be his son. And I said, hasta la vista, baby, which he always said to me growing up from the movie Terminator. He always said that when he said goodbye, hasta la vista, baby. And I kissed him on the forehead. And I went home that night and I prayed like I prayed every single night. And I said the same prayer that I said every single night for months, which was to please end my father's suffering. He suffered enough. Please end my father's suffering. He suffered enough. But there was something different about this time, this prayer that night, that I felt like I was being heard. And I can't explain it or put it into words, but I felt like I was being listened to. And I went to bed that night. The next day, literally less than 24 hours, around 12 p.m., I got a phone call on my cell phone, and I look at the phone, and it's the hospital, and my heart just sunk in my chest. I just knew something was up, and I pick up the phone, and it's the nurse letting me know that my father passed away that morning. And with that, I sat down on my couch. My dog was staring right at me. He knew something was up, and I was just crying. And a part of me was so happy that my father's no longer suffering. He's actually not in pain anymore. And then the other part of me was so destroyed by the fact that my one and only father is no longer with me. And that's where my life changed in 2014, because I wanted to know what happened to my dad. And I started to study the stats on diabetes, and I came across disgusting stats. I mean, 60% of Americans are diabetic or pre-diabetic. You know, there's people who are getting their feet amputated, kidney disease, and the number one cause of kidney dysfunction is diabetes. And I realized that nobody dies from diabetes, first of all. They die from the degeneration of it, the diseases that are associated with it, like my father, the strokes, the amputations, the kidney disease, the cancer. And I came to the realization that the information I now share is the same information that would have saved his life, my father's life. And I also came to the realization that I was given that mountain so I could show the world that the mountain can be moved. Mm-hmm. And that's my purpose. That's my why. And that's much more long lasting than a six-pack ab or something like that. And that's why I'm on a mission, dude, just like you, to put a dent in disease.
Holy shit. That got me emotional. Oh my God. That was a beautiful and extremely sad, but also hopeful and inspirational. I mean, there's no words for that, but the beautiful thing is obviously, going through that trauma, that difficulty, and turning it into a purpose, a mission. And certainly that's definitely something I've recognized is it seems that the people that really make something of their lives are the ones that have really gone through those hard situations and they chose to rise to the occasion. And it is one of those, we all go through these very traumatic, very challenging periods. Life is very kind of indiscriminate with hardship, and so it's a matter of, do you let it break you or do you make something of it? And certainly to be able to take that and turn that into your purpose and your gift to the world. And, the reality too, we all have to have jobs. We all have to make money. We all have to, we don't, we're not in survival primal times and getting eaten by lions, but a lot of the same principles still applies of we still got to hustle. You still got to make money. You got to put food on the table and a roof over your head. But it's a matter of, are you just working a job or are you living your purpose? And that's something beautiful, which is why I'm so big on the functional psychology and spirituality, where, I mean, the beautiful thing about science and research, it ends up validating what we intuitively know. And so there is research to demonstrate that having a sense of purpose increases longevity, or, loneliness is its own predictive marker of all-cause mortality. So I think it's an amazingly beautiful purpose that you are now living, and it makes perfect sense. And with type 2 diabetes and insulin resistance, I kind of live my own world in my own bubble. But, when I do get out and I go into society and I'm out and about on the streets, it's terrifying. It's terrifying what you see. And, it's mind blowing of it's standard American diet is sugar, vegetable oil, a lot of different chemicals and preservatives and colors. And it just breaks my heart. I had Laura Adler on the show just recently, and obviously environmental toxins and all of that. But we didn't spend the time talking about obesogens and xenobiotics. We spent the time talking about the big picture of society and the socioeconomic crisis and the bigger picture. And so that's where certainly I was just at a medical doctor's office the other day with my mom to be her advocate and be there for her. And I'm just kind of observing what's going around, and they had this diabetic magazine sitting here of and I'm kind of looking at it like, yeah, what kind of literature are they putting in hospitals these days, or at least the one that I'm at? And yeah, type 2 diabetes. And I mean, overall, I was pleased to see the information, and it was constructive and helpful, but also still a very just like, take your insulin and try to improve your lifestyle. Very generic. And well, weight loss helps with da da da. It's like, oh yeah, I mean, I guess we have to deliver some kind of information to the masses, but I just really can't respect you more, my brother.
Yeah, thank you. I'm the same. The feeling is mutual, and you said a lot of important things there. The American Diabetes Association, their dietary advice is based off of 0% research and 100% expert consensus.
Mhm.
I mean, how ridiculous is that? 100% is based off of expert consensus. And Dr. Ken Berry shared about that and the tragic advice they give. I tell people all the time, what if the information they share on their website is actually the information that causes diabetes? I believe it can.
Mhm.
I mean, grains, they're talking about, yeah, limit your sugar intake, but then they recommend a diet high in carbohydrates that turn it into sugar in the body, right?
Mhm.
So it baffles me. And then the thing about the toxins, and Laura Adler, she's awesome. She was also on my Keto Camp podcast. Amazing, amazing woman. I'm going to be giving a talk at Low Carb USA in January in Boca. And my talk is about diabetes, toxins, and obesity. What's the link? What's the
Mhm.
link there? And 33% of diabetes is toxin related. So
Mhm.
if somebody has toxins in their body from heavy metals, from whatever it is, silver fillings or lead-based paint, we know that toxins are everywhere. And I'm sure she went into detail on where they are. They're in our freaking dust in our home. When we have toxins in the body, it creates cellular inflammation. When we have cellular inflammation, all of a sudden our receptor sites are blunted. So now insulin cannot get the glucose into the cells. So glucose goes up and the pancreas works harder to produce insulin. And if you don't take care of those toxins over time, you become insulin resistant. You could be eating a healthy diet, but if you have toxins, you could become insulin resistant and eventually get diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. So there's so many things to consider there, and I don't want to overwhelm people with just freaking them out here. But I just want people to understand that diabetes can be caused from food, lifestyle, and also toxins, and we got to just explore that. That's why it's so important to work with somebody like Brendan, who's a health detective, and you could help to identify what are these areas that are leading to the disease, because there's always a cause and an effect.
Mhm.
What I saw with my dad and the conventional doctors, and I am not bashing doctors, but it's unfortunate that doctors focus on the effect, and
Mhm.
a lot of the times they neglect to see that there's a cause. And
Mhm.
Einstein said it best. He said, intellectuals solve problems, geniuses prevent them.
Mhm.
So what we're talking about here is becoming a genius, empowering the world to be a genius here, to figure out what is the cause and not just treat symptoms and play that a whole whack-a-mole game.
Exactly. And certainly something I've observed, because I am a younger guy, and it's kind of one of those, like, you learn something new that feels groundbreaking and very important. And then, of course, what do you want to do? You want to scream from the rooftops, like, everybody needs to know this. And certainly I found myself, like, there's a maturity that develops where it's like, okay, well, speak your truth, but you don't always need to project your truth or force your truth upon others. And, you do have to, we all have to deliver education in a, mature and, non-invasive or non-overwhelming or abrasive type of way if we want that information to be received well. And I love it how we're already talking about the necessity for a holistic approach, where okay, well, it's not just insulin resistance and carbohydrate intake in its own bubble. It's not just the environmental toxins that Lara focuses on, or a lot of people know me for like mold toxicity, but that's the beautiful thing. It's like, well, no, I mean, that's where with FDN, which we're both FDN practitioners, now we met, you know, metabolic chaos, right? I love that phrase, metabolic chaos. And that's where one of my big goals, I'm hoping to start a not-for-profit research foundation, because it's like, look, our world, specifically America, is really suffering from an environmental and lifestyle induced epidemic, and the healthcare system that we currently have is purely allopathic, and it's very simple. We can't cut and medicate our way out of what is a lifestyle and environmental epidemic. It just, that makes no sense. Now, I will say, I will make the comment, I was very pleased and impressed by the experience from Monday, when I went to with my mom to her primary care medical doctor. I was very pleased with how receptive and how more kind of integrative she was. And now, on the one hand, oh gosh, like we're going through a list of like 10 different medications. Like, are all these really necessary? And we're treating side effects of one pill with another pill. And it's just like, okay, well, yep, we got a long ways to go. But healthcare is changing, and I'm very excited. It's a very exciting time to be in this industry, because I really think we're going to see massive transformation within the next 10 years. Would you agree?
Yeah, I do agree, especially with the rise of how popular keto is.
Yeah.
And keto has been proven, if you do it the right way, to reverse things like insulin resistance. So I do think so. Also, because of the work that you're doing, the work that I'm doing, the work that our community is doing, and social media. The fact
Yeah.
that we have these tools like never before, people could actually look up studies and we can get the message out there. So I'm with you, man. It's an exciting time
Hmm.
in this day and age.
Hmm. Yeah, it's beautiful. And I like how, there's so many, microbiome and environmental toxicity and, keto and sleep science. There's just so many pieces to it. And I love seeing this kind of holistic movement on the rise, because it's kind of the only way, it's kind of the only way forward. So, all right, we're going to dive into this keto stuff, though, because I know that's what the crowd, give the people what they want. So I'll start this by saying, I don't know how many people know this about me other than people that know me from the gym. But when I first started my career, I was all about keto. I lived, breathed, practiced, preached keto. I was like 19, 20, 21. And at that point in time, my at the time kind of professionals that I looked up to, um, they were all about keto. And back then it was like, if you were into keto, like you were a cool kid, you were ahead of the curve, like you knew something nobody else knew. And of course, I wanted to be one of the cool kids, so I was all about that life. And so I had my own experience with keto, which I've written an article about and posted online, and I'm pretty knowledgeable on it. And so at the end of the day, comes down to keto is a potentially amazingly therapeutic tool. And I love how literally when we started the show, you described it as a tool in the toolbox. And I love that. It's not a cure all, it's not a one size fits all, it's a tool that can be used intelligently. And so, I won't go into a long story of, my keto experience, but hey, I hate hypocrisy. I hate sensationalism, and kind of egotistical bias. And so I refuse to be that myself. And that's where I was that guy once upon a time, mixing like, okay, peanut butter, heavy whipping cream, and protein powder. And that's like my 2,000 calorie keto dinner. Eating the 2 packs of bacon with a pack of cheese because, well, it's all about getting that 80% macro fat ratio, bro. You know what I mean? And so then my point being, when I was practicing keto, now there was also a bodybuilding show that, threw me into a metabolic chaos loop because it was the typical, restrictive dieting and suffer and starve and then relapse and all of that. But during that phase, it was the only time in my life I've ever struggled with excess body fat. Now, is that because keto didn't work for me, or is it I didn't work for keto? Is it, I wasn't doing it intelligently? So certainly, I've got family members right now that are trying to do keto and kind of doing some of the silly behavioral stuff. And that's where, I was very excited to have you on to share, some true enlightenment of like, how do we do keto the right way? Because it is a high skilled diet. And I firmly believe if there are not foundational behaviors that are not in place, or if we don't have a healthy relationship with ourselves or food to begin with, that's where we start, not with trying to, weigh our calories and count our macros to make sure our carbs are less than 10%. And you know what I mean? So give us the 101, and then we'll just dive in with what would be your initial advice for somebody that is wanting to maybe start keto because they hear about all the rage and they're like, is this for me?
Yes, great setup. Well, there's no cookie cutter approach to our health, and keto is the same thing. And as you just said, it's a tool in the toolbox. I believe it's a very powerful tool that could get amazing results if you do it the right way. And I'll share some tips with you shortly. Also, it could hurt you if you don't know what you're doing. Same thing as a chainsaw. Chainsaw, powerful tool. If you know how to use it, you'll get amazing results. Don't know how to use it, it's going to hurt you. So we got to use that tool. What's more important than the tool is the person who wields that tool. Mm-hmm. So I tell people that keto, although it is trending on Dr. Google, number one search term, what is the keto diet, will yield you 180 million results plus. Crazy, number one search term. It's not necessarily a diet. Keto is a metabolic process that's been around since the dawn of humankind. Mm-hmm. Now, it's a survival mechanism that might sound a little extreme when somebody hears survival mechanism, but the body, all it wants to do is survive. Mm-hmm. And it's so sophisticated that when you force this adaptation through a healthy keto lifestyle, the good cells we have in our body, they'll get stronger, right? Mm-hmm. The bad cells, when you create adaptation, they don't adapt well. The mitochondria that's damaged, it does not adapt well. So you're cleaning out house. What are some things that somebody who wants to follow keto or they just started keto to get them amazing results? Well, I don't think you should be in ketosis all the time. I teach somebody to use keto as a way to reset your hormones, teach your cells to burn fat instead of sugar, mm-hmm. reverse insulin resistance if you have that. And once you accomplish that, then it's time to start flexing out of ketosis. And how long do you flex for? How long are you in ketosis? It varies on the person. And that's where the difficulty is in communicating that through our social media and our videos, because it's different for every single person. So every time I share something, I'm giving you general rules to follow. But the answer I'm going to give you here is I like a 80% in ketosis, 20% out of ketosis type of philosophy for most people. Mm-hmm. So what are some things to consider, though, when you start going into keto, into a high-fat, low-carbohydrate diet? Number one, you got to make sure your liver and gallbladder are efficient. Mm-hmm. That liver is pumping out healthy bile to break down that fat, mm-hmm. because bile not only breaks down that fat, not only acts as a detergent to break down all the fats on keto, but it's also what's going to help remove toxins from the body. Mm-hmm. And when you lose weight on keto, guess what gets dumped into your bloodstream? Toxins. And I'm sure Laura probably spoke about that, because all these fat-soluble toxins, they get stored in our fat cells as a survival mechanism. The body is so brilliant. So when we start to lose weight on keto, our body cannot burn toxins for fuel. So as we burn fat cells, those toxins get dumped into the bloodstream. And if you have sluggish bile because you have a fatty liver and that liver has been beat up all your life, then all of a sudden you cannot remove those toxins and you'll feel like crap, and you cannot break down that fat and you'll feel like crap. And all of a sudden you're thinking, keto doesn't work for me. I'm not getting the results I want. This diet is stupid. Mm-hmm. Well, that's not necessarily true. It's just the approach was not the right approach. So some things you can do is gradually, if you're a pure sugar burner eating, let's say 300, 400 grams of carbs a day, gradually start to decrease those carbohydrates while you increase healthy protein, healthy fat, and no snacking in between meals. That's kind of like the first tip right there. While you do that, have bitter-rich foods. Bitter is better. Ginger tea, dandelion greens, dandelion tea, dark chocolate, even coffee that I have here, organic, shade-grown, mold-free, the mold guy, toxin-free coffee will help stimulate bile to break down that fat, and then also maybe taking a digestive enzyme with ox bile to help break down that fat. That'll make a big difference. Also, you're going to lose a lot of water weight. The kidneys will release a lot of water weight and electrolytes when you transition from being a sugar burner to a fat burner. So it's important to get in high quality sea salt every single day. In the morning, I put it in my water. I put it in my coffee. Coffee is a diuretic, by the way, so you lose more electrolytes. So throw in some sea salt, replenish the electrolytes. Those two tips right there will go a long way with feeling better and avoiding the keto flu, which is really just a carbohydrate withdrawal symptoms going on. So that's the first step, and we could take it from there.
Dude, that was literally the best intro to keto I've ever heard. And I've talked to many of people. You touched on some absolutely crucial pieces there. I'm really glad you brought up the toxin release and toxin storage of fat cells and the bile flow. Because absolutely, I think any kind of weight loss program needs to also be a detoxification program, period. Because of that. And then certainly, these days, obviously, gut health and microbiome health is kind of all the rage as well, which is great. I'm happy to see that because, yeah, I think we all pretty much agree that, like, okay, well, gut health is kind of ground zero for overall metabolic health. We are the result of what we ingest, but then more so what we're able to, digest and absorb and assimilate. And so certainly, yeah, that bile that's going to help us emulsify those fats. But like you said, all of the toxins that get processed in the liver get dumped in the bile. And a lot of Americans, a lot of people have biliary stasis or, I was just doing recordings for my course yesterday and, getting into the methylation modules. And so then it's like, oh, well, you have 50% of the population has, deficient methylation. They don't have enough phosphatidylcholine to make that bile viscous, which, hey, methylation is phase 2 detox pathway itself. So I love that you're starting with like, okay, bile flow, gut health. How can we, in the detoxification process? Now, with the carb adaptation versus fat adapted, I remember way back in the day, Mark Sisson had a beautiful article about fat adaptation. And, that just like blew my mind back then. And like with metabolic testing or VO2 testing, we can look at the respiratory quotient, right? So we have, 0.7 respiratory quotient, which theoretically is like pure fat burning versus a respiratory quotient of 1.0. Well, that's anaerobic threshold and sugar burning, right? Not that we need to give the crowd a lesson on like aerobic, anaerobic metabolism, but I think it's important for them to understand if we simplify it, like, okay, well, the body really works through the principle of trying to strive to maintain homeostasis through the principle of specific adaptation to imposed demand. So obviously, if we're feeding ourselves high sugar diets, what does the body get good and reliant at using as its primary fuel source? Well, sugar. And so that is always kind of that foundational principle that gets people interested. Like, oh, wait a second, I can train my body to be better burning, be better at burning fat. So certainly that is kind of the metabolic adaptation. And a lot of people, of course, with typical dieters and seeking that instant gratification, hey, let me just jump, I don't know how to swim, but I want to learn how to swim. So let me jump into the ocean and just see what happens. And that's what a lot of people are doing with keto, right? And so the keto flu that is going to occur, AKA like you jumped in the ocean, you're starting to drown because you don't know how to swim. Yep. So it's like, let's start tippy toeing in the water. So how would you recommend somebody transition into keto? You mentioned, okay, well, let's start by starting to lower the carbohydrate, starting to raise the fat. do you feel like there's a certain time frame that there should be this transition, a week, a month, 2 months, or how would you explain and recommend that?
Yeah, great question. I have a online program called the Keto Camp Academy, and in the academy, I have a 28-day keto jumpstart. And I have a 4-pillar approach to the way I teach keto. The first pillar is the adapt pillar, the adaptation, fat adaptation, which takes 28 days. And that's where I have the structure of, okay, let's determine how many carbs you're having right now. Let's say it's 300. Well, this week, the next 7 days, I want you to drop that to 200 while you increase these specific sources of fats, bitter-rich foods, and protein with no snacking in between meals. And then we keep doing that until we get to the desired effect of 50 grams of carbohydrates or less per day, and eating until full, having those protein and fat foods that help satiate us. So it typically takes about 4 weeks to get that person the right way into ketosis so they don't feel like crap as they make that transition. I'm with you. I think it's important not to just jump off and figure out how to swim when it comes to keto. I like it in other components, maybe with business, but I know a lot of influencers, keto guys, they teach that. Just suck it up, get through that keto flu. I don't think it's necessary. I think there's a better approach to doing it. So once I get them into ketosis, which I verify with blood ketones, I got to tell people that all the time. I get people commenting, "Hey, I checked my urine strips, I checked my breath, and I'm not in ketosis. I've been doing keto for 6 months." I got to tell you that those are not as accurate as blood. It's not going, especially the urine, because it's only accurate in the first few weeks. But once your body gets efficient at metabolizing those ketones, it won't show up in the urine, which is a good thing. Number 2 is, yes, check your blood. I use Keto Mojo, but we don't chase ketones. We chase results. Okay. Higher ketones are not necessarily better. And as you know, that means your body is not metabolizing those ketones, which we don't like that. So I have found the sweet spot for me, and it's different for everybody, to be somewhere between 0.8 and 2.5. Unless I'm doing like a block fast, an extended fast, then the ketones will go up. So we get into ketosis. That's the adapt pillar. The second pillar is the fast pillar. That's where I introduce intermittent fasting. I like an 18-6 schedule. That's my favorite schedule, which means 18 hours, you're in a fasted state, you're having water, you're having sea salt, very important. You can have things like coffee or tea if you determine that it does not break your fast. So 18 hours you're fasted, 6 hours you're feasting. That's an important word, feasting, eating until full, reminding the body that it's not starving. This approach is not meant to cut calories. This approach is not about eating less. This approach is about eating less often. You still have the same calories, the same meals, but within a specific window. That's the fast pillar. The third pillar is what I call the phase pillar. That's where we actually go strict keto, very extreme, just for 2 weeks. We go down to 10 grams of carbohydrates. We force the mitochondria to start burning subcutaneous fat, to start adapting to only using fat for fuel short term. Once you get through that third pillar, you graduate into my fourth pillar, which is the flex pillar. Then I provide different variations of you to practice keto flexing. Depending on your goals, you would do different rules, but that's where you follow different approaches to start getting out of ketosis. With that being said, there are specific considerations for women who have their monthly cycle. Here's what I have in my academy. For women who have their monthly cycle, I don't recommend being in ketosis 5 to 7 days leading up to their monthly cycle, not doing much fasting that same week, because that's the week that insulin from those carbohydrate-rich foods will help specific conversions, hormonal conversions, and help with the uterine lining in that monthly cycle. So there are unique considerations there, but I say, so 5 to 7 days, get out of ketosis, and then once your period starts, you could go right back in. So there's always special considerations, and I hope I was able to get that through, that message there.
Yeah, well, first and foremost, your 28-day keto jumpstart, that sounds amazing, and I want to be sure to get a link for information to provide everybody with that, because that sounds like the best keto jumpstart I've ever heard of. And I think it's amazing that you're like this. I'm just mind blown. This is amazing stuff. Because it's like, how do we bio-individualize keto? And so certainly, in this episode, I love that we started with the purpose and the psychology and even relationship with food. And, as much as I love going in those topics, those are topics I discuss on other episodes. But, if I was giving somebody advice, it's like, all right, well, step one, let's start working on improving the relationship with yourself, your environment, your food, your loved ones, doing that ego work and so that's where we're about to release the episode with holistic psychologists of like, let's learn how to practice unconditional love, and then, okay, what's next? Well, let's start moving. Let's eat real food only. When it was after my first bodybuilding show, and I was still very hell-bent on making keto work for me. And to be honest, I wasn't in a good place, like mentally. I was really struggling with depression and fatigue and a lot of other stuff. I was one of those unhealthy fit people.
Yeah.
And it's funny how actually becoming a fitness professional at first made me like less fit and less healthy, because you learn a thing or two. And I became that guy that was like, anything more than 13 reps is cardio and it's going to kill your gains. That was me. Meanwhile, like, let me get my super fatty, prime rib, and just doing stupid stuff and not practicing it well. And yeah, I had a great respiratory quotient. I had before and after, metabolic testing RMR results of like, oh yeah, used to be very much a sugar burner at rest. Well, that's not right. We're supposed to burn fat at rest. It's not, we're not supposed to tap into glycogen and sugar until we start becoming more anaerobic. Let's save that sugar and creatine for anaerobic activity. Like, there's a reason why we only store 200 grams of glycogen in the liver, and there's a reason why glycogen can't be released from skeletal muscle. And so I like how you mentioned how keto is kind of a survival mechanism of, all right, well, carbohydrate scarce environment, red blood cells and neurons, hey, we need an alternative fuel source because there's insufficient glucose. Let's start cranking out this, these ketones. And now, of course, we have all this exogenous ketone or, different types of supplements to help kind of further stimulate ketones. I'm glad you brought up intermittent fasting because that was another thing. If we think about it from, more primal, well, yeah, it's not really natural to constantly pass a, steady and consistent stream of food stuff through our gastrointestinal tract. Like, that's not really normal. Like, we didn't evolve that way. We feasted and we fasted. But a lot of, as you said, it was what, 60% of Americans are insulin resistant or type 2 diabetic?
Yep.
So, okay, well, a lot of, and gut health, right? How many Americans have like good microbiome health? Not too many.
Maybe
so
like less than 5%.
Totally. So that's beautiful. So we're gonna, we're gonna do a transition into keto. We're gonna bio-individualize it. So what demographics would you say are ideal for considering transitioning into keto?
Definitely entrepreneurs, somebody or small business owners, somebody who wants to get rid of brain fog and get to the root cause of their weight gain, because weight gain is not the problem, it's the symptom of the problem. So healthy keto will help you get to the actual cause and help your cells get healthier. And then a side effect of getting healthier is the weight will come off. So anybody who has more than 10 pounds to lose, anybody who has insulin resistance, absolutely. An entrepreneur who wants to use ketones as a little biohack to fuel the brain. And the cool thing about that, once you are keto adapted, it's such a burden off the shoulders. You don't have to snack every 2 to 3 hours. You don't have to travel on an airplane and eat airplane food. When I'm traveling, I'm fasting. That airplane is already inflammatory. So putting food and taking resources away from healing the body from that airplane to digest food is not a good idea for me. So I'll fast. So if you're an entrepreneur, if you're traveling, these are great hacks for you to incorporate into your lifestyle. Now, you want to make sure you do it the right way. Like I mentioned earlier on, keto, there's no cookie cutter approach to keto. There is some specific foods that I tell my keto campers to avoid, and those are vegetable oils, and they're everywhere. And you talk about it, soybean oil, canola, cottonseed, sunflower, peanut, grapeseed, all these are inflammatory. The body cannot burn these vegetable oils. they actually sit on the cell membrane. And a study showed in the PEO solution by Professor Peskin, on average, when you consume these cooked vegetable oils, it stays on our cells. Our cell membrane becomes inflamed on average for 132 days. 5 minutes of pleasure, 5 months of dysfunction. So yes, you could get into ketosis by eating these inflammatory oils, but you're not going to get healthy. So instead, it's important to have the right oils: avocado oil, olive oil, coconut oil, MCT oil, grass-fed butter, grass-fed ghee. Our cells love that. Our cells will prefer that as a fuel source. So to answer your question, a long-winded answer, I think it's great for anybody to use it as a tool. Now, how long they use it will depend on that person's goal.
Love that answer. Let's customize it to the individual. So, like omega-3 testing, something obviously in our functional lab testing world that we're both a part of. I don't think enough people are just doing a little finger prick omega-3, omega-6 test. So speaking of the refined vegetable oils and everything, a lot of omega-6, a lot of polyunsaturated, and certainly that was something I teach in my course. I have a whole module. Because a lot of the listeners to this podcast are extremely educated. So it's like, how much detail do we go into? But, arachidonic acid and inflammation and icosanoid modulation and cell membrane health. I think people don't really realize it's like, okay, your body's made up of about 150 trillion human cells. And we actually have a lot more microbial cells than human cells. We're more bacteria than human. Fun fact. But then it's like, okay, every single one of these human cells has this phospholipid membrane, and the fats that you eat are what your cell membranes end up made up of. And so when you're consuming all of these, very chemically unstable, vegetable oils or the transsaturated fat, we're just packing every one of our cell membranes full of, I kind of like to describe it like gunpowder, right? They're highly reactive, highly inflammatory. All we need is that spark. And in today's world, we have tons of sparks left and right. EMF radiation is a spark. Food sensitivities is a spark. Microbial imbalances, or a fun fact that I think people going in keto need to know with gut health and endotoxemia. So all these lipopolysaccharides are being released from bad bugs. Well, saturated fat helps transport those across the intestinal lumen, so then it's like, we really have to make sure we're laying that foundation. You talked about bile earlier. Bile is enormously important for, cleaning out bad bacteria of the gut. So this is where I think people can, absolutely be successful of, let's shift from a carbohydrate adapted metabolism into more of a fat adapted. Let's work on that gut health. Let's work on that bile flow. Let's work on that detox. So I think I love how you're breaking it down into a step-by-step progression. So with intermittent fasting, certainly a lot of people might not be able to tolerate it right away. Like if you're one of those 60% and you're insulin resistant, you probably don't have the blood sugar stability and regulation to be able to go for, however many hours. So what advice would you give somebody that's struggling to stick to like your 18-6, window there?
Yeah, great question. Fasting is a muscle you develop. So that's why it's my second pillar. I don't recommend it until you get fat adapted first, because what happens if you just say, oh, I heard about all these benefits of fasting, which, by the way, fasting is my favorite tool in that toolbox. I love keto, but fasting is my favorite thing to study and to teach. I think it's fantastic. It's done amazing things for my health and my community. It's helped reverse my Raynaud's disease, by the way. So I would say this: if you go into a fast because you heard all the benefits of it, but you're not fat adapted, here's what's going to happen. You're going to skip lunch, and you're going to be a very angry person. You're going to be hangry. Your blood sugar is going to drop, specifically your glucose in your brain, but you don't have the metabolic flexibility now to go from burning sugar, which your body's used to doing for so many years, to tapping into your fat stores. So you don't have that flexibility yet. You haven't worked put in the work to develop that muscle. So the brain will send the body an intense signal for cravings to get carbohydrates, to get sugar, to get that glucose spike.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say you have the best willpower in the world. I'm just going to fight that through. I'm a freaking badass. Screw these cravings. And you just fight through it. You fight through it. What happens is then your body's going to say, okay, you're not going to eat the sugar. I'm going to break down your protein and turn that into sugar via gluconeogenesis.
Mm-hmm.
So you start to lose muscle, you start to lose protein, and that could be a bad thing as well, because we know that muscle is a longevity organ. You're a perfect example of that. So what we want to do is we want to get fat adapted first, so you don't have that issue. So once your brain stops using the glucose and your body starts to get low in your glycogen stores, and you actually burn through your glycogen stores, your sugar reserves, all of a sudden now you're fat adapted and you turn on the switch to tap into your fat stores. You start breaking down triglycerides. And now your liver sends a signal to produce ketones for the brain. That's what we want to do. So you want to get I recommend getting fat adapted and keto adapted first. That's why I teach people to do that first for 28 days. And then I add the intermittent fasting.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. And it's funny how we humans, we do a really good job at overcomplicating everything, and it's like, well, there's only 3 macro, and then these days carnivore is starting to pick up a lot too. And it's just like, how many ways can we overcomplicate? And it's like, well, maybe we should just eat real food from the earth that's clean sourced, and listening to our bodies. So my friend Jade Tata, he's coming on the show next month. I'm really excited.
Awesome. Yeah, I love his work.
Yeah, Jade is, oh my gosh, like he was a game changer in my career. When I started studying his work, I immediately took a hard turn into, more functional medicine stuff. And he developed a tool, keep your heck in check, your hunger, energy, cravings. And I took that one step further of HECM, so hunger, energy, cravings, mood. And so I like to teach clients, like, okay, pretty simple. We're going to develop some mindfulness and awareness of self, which is pretty important for everything in life. But it's like, if and some people, they might need to write it down, until they develop that awareness. But it's one of those, like, okay, so hunger, energy, cravings, motivation. Mindfully rate that on a scale of 0 to 10, 0 being not present, 10 being extremely high. So the goal, let's keep your hunger always less than like a 7 or 8. By the time you're hitting 7, 8 of hunger, maybe you should eat. Energy, let's keep that above a 5 or 6. We want to keep energy high, hunger low, cravings low, mood and mental health high. And so I think if we apply that principle of awareness, because then as I'm going to do a 24-hour fast, and I think there's a balancing act of, like, if you're, because the fear, and this was me back in the day, I'm not a hypocrite. Back in the day, I'm going to fast, because I was doing intermittent fasting with keto, and I was trying to keep myself to like a 6 or 8 hour eating window. But exactly that, I'm not doing an intelligent keto diet. I already have bad gut health. I already have all these metabolic issues. And then I'm trying to, force my body to do something it's not ready to do. And so then what happens? Well, I end up binging. I eat a bunch of high fat, but then I go binge on sugar because I'm getting exactly what you just said. So I think this type of conversation is going to be extremely valuable for the people that, well, they're trying to do the keto because they've heard of all the amazing benefits, but then they're struggling to implement it and they don't know why.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate because there's a lot of bad information out there, and there's a lot of good information, but it's hard. What the problem is this, and I experienced it myself, and sometimes I still do. I go and I look at research, and I see highly credible people saying you should do it this way, and then I see highly credible people saying you should do it the exact opposite way. And for the average person, it'll leave them paralyzed. For example, look at the documentary Game Changers. I'm sure you've had so many people ask you about have you heard about it, the vegan documentary?
Yeah, and I saw that, Joe Rogan, Chris Kresser episode that everybody's talking about now. I haven't seen it though. So.
Yeah, it's a great episode. But the example I want to give is that documentary is probably the best vegan documentary in the history of this world. They did a really fantastic job, production, the money they put into it. and it's doing a lot more harm than good because it's very much propaganda-based, bias-based, and fear-mongering. But the average person is going to watch that and say, oh my gosh, I'm going vegan. And then they'll get some results short-term, and then all of a sudden, they'll hit that vegan wall, and they're going to blame themselves and not the bad science in that film. So what our work is so important to get this information out there to cut through all that noise, because the average person will be so confused, so misinformed, and that's why we have a sick world. And the job that we're doing is so important because it helps cut through all that noise.
Yeah, exactly. You know, I always joke like death to bro science a little bit.
Yes.
Gotta kill that bro science. But
Yes.
You couldn't be more right. So something, you know, we're both familiar with like metabolic typing or somatotyping, or, you know, there's a lot of kind of different methodologies. They're all basically built on the same principle of kind of like, all right, well, you're either more of like a mixed burner, fat burner, sugar burner, or like, you know, muscle burner versus fat burner. There's kind of different ways of portraying it, but it kind of comes down to the same concept. And, you know, like somatotyping, are you an endomorph? Like you're just naturally kind of thick? You know, you're an ectomorph, you're a hard gainer, you have a hard time putting on muscle and you don't gain fat very easily and you can get away with eating anything, those people, or you're kind of somewhere in the middle. And I always like to describe that as like a spectrum of 0 to 100. So like 33.3, you know, of fat burner, 33.3 mixed burner, 33.3, you know, sugar burner. And so I think people need to recognize they're going to kind of fall somewhere within that spectrum. And the type of, you know, fuel mixture, right? We only have 3 macronutrients. You know, they probably all serve their purpose. Or, you know, maybe we could say there's 3.5 macronutrients, with ketones being kind of that 0.5 or something. And I think people need to kind of understand, like, we have to, again, start with real food and then start customizing that based on, you know, what feels right and doing it in an intelligent way. Because, you know, I firmly believe if all of America stripped away grains and dairy and we just ate real food, that would work wonders. Or, you know, if we all did paleo or all did Whole30, that would work wonders. Or, yeah, even if we, as a nation, and this is where the keto diet is, a lot of ways, a potential savior. You know, 60% are insulin resistant. What's one of the fastest ways to reverse insulin resistance? Well, yeah, ketogenic diet is a shiner, absolutely. But as we can really see now through this conversation, it has to be done intelligently rather than, you know, slurping on that toxin laden, you know, heavy whipping cream.
Or slim fast keto products.
Oh, does that exist already?
Yeah, it's been co-opted, dude.
Well, that's really unfortunate. Okay. I want to ask you about gut health and keto. We talked about bile. How do you feel about gut health in relation to implementing a ketogenic diet?
Yeah, it's so important. I mean, you talk a lot about gut health, and I've learned a lot from you actually about gut health. It's one of the legs of the stool. And my coach, Dr. Pompa, talks about this. There's 3 legs to this stool. You have your DNA, the genes that we're born with. You have your gut microbiome, and then you have other hidden stressors. So if that gut is dysfunctioning, all of a sudden that stool falls over, you trigger a bad gene, right? You trigger an autoimmune gene. So a lot of these autoimmune diseases, we have 100 of them that have been classified as autoimmune, another 40 that's been associated with autoimmune. A lot of that stems from the gut. Your body starts to attack itself. And you talk a lot about this. It starts to attack your thyroid, Hashimoto's thyroiditis, starts to attack your joints or rheumatoid arthritis. So if you could focus on the cause and start healing the gut, a lot of those genes will get fixed. My perfect example here is this. I have Raynaud's disease. Raynaud's is a disease where my hands are super cold. I don't get good blood flow to my fingertips, to the point, Brendan, where my quality of life was so low because of this. You know, I anytime I was in a cold room, I was freezing. My hands were ice cold. They would go numb. They would like turn white. If I drank like a Zevia, I drank Zevia. Sometimes I get it from the fridge, and I'm holding that can of Zevia for more than 10 minutes. My hands will go numb, and I had to like put it underneath a warmer to get it warm because I don't have good blood flow. I was actually hiking in Washington a couple years ago, and I polar plunged in this freezing lake, and I almost lost my fingers. Honestly, they went gangrene on me. I had to find hikers and get a lighter to light a fire underneath my fingers. I thought I was going to lose them. So it was it's a terrible way to live, and it was triggered because of my leaky gut, mold exposure, heavy metals in my silver fillings. So I got out of the house that I had mold. I did mold detox. I removed my amalgam fillings safely. I'm pulling out the mercury from my brain tissue. I'm fixing my gut, which was one of the pillars here. And I got to tell you this. I haven't shared this yet. It's been, well, before I share it. Another thing that happens with this Raynaud's, and I don't know if somebody listening to this, they're thinking, oh my God, this is happening to me too. I didn't know I had Raynaud's. When I eat a meal at night, like clockwork, after I'm done with that meal, my hands get the opposite, super warm and inflamed, and they start to swell up where I can't even pull off my ring. It happens every single night, always at dinner, last meal of the day. It's been 30 plus days now, and I haven't had any of those flare-ups, and my hands are not even that cold anymore. I'm starting to actually reverse this thing, finally, but it's been chipping away at my gut, pulling out the toxins, the mercury in my brain, working on the mold, the mycotoxins in my body. But one of the tools was that gut. I started to fix my gut. I started to do things like fasting, which help repair the gut. And the reason I share this is because people think that they have autoimmune and they're stuck with it for the rest of their life. But that was a gene that was turned on, and genes are like the lights I have in this room. We turn on the lights, we turn off the lights. We could turn off those genes. I'm turning off my genes. You could do it yourself. And one of the ways to do it is with the gut. The gut is crucial. You said we're more bacteria than anything else. It's true. And our immune system is in the gut. It is the second brain. So you got to find a way to heal that gut, eating bitter-rich foods, getting rid of other stressors, figuring out your trigger foods. Definitely get the grains out, get the pasteurized dairy out, the soybeans, the corn, even peanuts. You probably talk about this. Peanuts are loaded with mold mycotoxins. It's one of the highest amount. And coffee is creating leaky gut. Pesticides and herbicides. Coffee is the #1 sprayed crop in the world. So if you're going to Starbucks every single morning, Dunkin' Donuts, and you're going through the drive-thru and you're drinking that coffee, that's poking holes in your gut. And the last point I'm going to make here is alcohol, specifically wine. The average California red wine has 64 herbicides and pesticides sprayed on it. So if you're having a nightly cup of wine, it's creating leaky gut. So if you remove the stressors, the body will heal. I'm a perfect example of that.
Yes, that was beautiful. I mean, you touched on so many crucial, and that's where that's what this podcast is all about, is like, how on earth could the average person living their normal life, that they don't study any of this stuff for a living, and it's like, because there's so many pieces. Just now we talked about gut health, we talked about bile flow, we talked about mycotoxicosis, we talked about heavy metals, and it's like, yeah, all the above, it all has to be addressed. A lot of people know me for my organic acid skills. And I've got to say, it's such a beautiful tool, because, we're able to get insight into microbes and gut health right there on page 1. Well, what's page 2 and 3? We're looking at toxicity. We're looking at detox pathways. We're looking at cellular metabolism. We look at Krebs cycle. We look at glycolytic markers. And actually, there's a ketone and fatty acid oxidation section. And I think people need to understand, like, honestly, a healthy individual, a healthy metabolism, a lot of people will dip into ketosis overnight.
Yeah.
Like I myself, I don't do a ketogenic diet per se. If I had to describe my diet, I guess I'd probably just say paleo, and I intermittent fast, aka I eat when I want. You know what I mean? Keep it simple. But every time I do my oat test, yeah, I've got some ketones coming out in that morning urine sample, because overnight, and so I do think everybody should be fat adapted. Now, whether that means we go all the way to ketosis, who knows? But some supplements and stuff, I'm kind of thinking of almost like a keto supplement starter pack, because everybody's reaching for ghee and MCT oil. I feel like, okay, how about let's put in a spore biotic, because the ketogenic diet, we do have to be mindful. We've got to get enough fibers and veggies to improve microbial diversity. And that's where, spore biotics, well, they reduce lipopolysaccharide-induced endotoxemia. So we're kind of cutting down a little bit on that inflammatory piece there. They improve microbial diversity. I think maybe some immunoglobulins, to neutralize, or some binders, right? And we're talking about detox. And then I think maybe like phosphatidylcholine too, and with the bitters, because like, let's get that bile flow and let's improve that cell membrane permeability. Now I'm kind of feeling inspired. I feel like I should make a little bundle or something for that.
Yeah, I love it.
We might be onto something with that. So first off, how are you doing on time? I want to make sure I'm not taking up your whole day.
So I have a live stream at 12 my time, so I have 20 more minutes.
Perfect. Yeah. I've got a meeting at that time too.
Perfect.
So your what's your next thing? You have your 28-day thing, which I want to talk about a little bit more momentarily. And I see you out there lecturing and speaking and educating the masses. So what are some exciting things you're working on right now to further deliver all this amazing info?
Yeah, thank you. I see you too, by the way, brother. Getting the message out there. Social media is one of those tools. My YouTube channel is probably the biggest thing for me right now. It's really grown fast since I've launched the channel about a year ago. It's got over 60,000 subscribers in less than a year, and it's growing. So I have a goal to get that to 1 million by the end of next year. And the significance of that number is yeah, it's pretty cool to say I got 1 million subscribers, but more important than that, that's 1 million people that's getting this information on a weekly basis. And I put out a new video, professionally edited. I study and I make sure I research and put it out about 4 times a week. Every other day I'm releasing a brand new video on that channel. So that I'm working on that. That's my biggest thing. Growing the podcast as well, just getting the information as much as possible. Like you said, lecturing. I want to be doing more lectures. You're doing a lot of lectures. I want to speak at FDN. I want to get out there. My highest value is speaking in front of people. I'm going to be speaking later today in downtown Miami, in New Orleans this Saturday. I just want to speak in front of people. I really enjoy that. Yeah. And all of that leads to how could they work with me? How could they get this information from me? And that's my online program, the Keto Camp Academy. It has that 28-day jumpstart. That's just one component in there. There's a section in there, as you touched upon, called Mental Six Pack. That's the section that I want people to go in there and watch a video or two. It's all self-development videos, because I could tell you everything you need to know about keto and fasting. But if you don't have the right mindset, if you don't have love and gratitude, which are two of the biggest healers in this world, you can't heal yourself. Like Dr. Will Cole says all the time, you cannot heal a body you hate. Yeah. So the significance of this section is to start loving yourself, start practicing gratitude, start becoming a victor of your future and not a victim of your past. And then you take control, and then everything else, the keto, the fasting, I have sleep, I have fitness in there. All that works better because of what's going on the inside. So I'm so happy with my Keto Camp Academy. I just launched it a couple months ago. We have 136 members right now. I have a goal to get 1,000 by the end of April. So that's my big thing. It's updated every single week. I'm getting all this information and I'm curating it into the academy, and it's going to help me get the information out to the world, because anybody in the world could join that academy. That's absolutely amazing. Congratulations on everything you're doing. Thank you, Brendan. I appreciate you. Thank you. I think I love that. And so with, we're kind of right on the edge of it. So unconditional love, because with my Holistic Savage tribe, we've got our 60-day Holistic Savage challenge, which is, as you can imagine, it's a jump start to, lay the foundation. And so certainly we teach all the principles of nutrition and exercise and mindfulness and, all the things, but it's all the big thing. And you just mentioned it is, in, Will Cole's, quote there. Every time, somebody is, hey, I want to improve my health, I want to do this diet. And again, that's where let's do the 5 why exercise. Ask yourself, like, why do I want to do the ketogenic diet? Well, I want to lose weight. Why do you want to lose weight? Well, I want to feel better. Why do you want to feel better? You know what I mean? Like, keep going until you really get to that root cause of why.
what is your why? If you don't know your why, you're going to give up, and it's not going to go very well. But the big thing, it is that paradigm shift of the mental six pack, where most dieters, most people trying to seek better health, they're doing it out of self-loathing. They don't like, and again, I'm saying this through experience, and I can only speak for myself, but I didn't like myself going to, I would punish myself in the gym rather than, work out because I love my body and I want to give it the stimuli it needs to operate at its best. So it's again that reframe of, we have to move and be fueling this whole health seeking process out of unconditional self love. And I firmly believe unconditional love for self and others, it's the only way. It's the fifth dimension. It's our natural state before we get domesticated and unplugged. And then we domesticate ourselves. And what's that story that we're telling ourselves? Inadequacy, you're not good enough, so you have to intermittent fast. You're not skinny enough, you're not cool enough, so you have to do the same diet everybody else is doing. And so I love how we're kind of bringing this full circle of, let's get back to, we have to learn the practice, the discipline that is unconditional self-love, and move through that day by day. And so the fact that you're incorporating that into a ketogenic program, yes.
Yeah, exactly. I love that you have your 60-day program as well, because it takes about 66 days to develop a new habit.
Yeah.
So it's not 21 days, it's not 28 days. So having something like that is so important, because we don't get what we want in life, we get what we are, and what we are is our thoughts. And if we're thinking negative thoughts about somebody, ourselves, for sure, that's the problem. If you're thinking hateful thoughts, if you're looking at yourself in the mirror and saying, "Oh gosh, I'm so ugly, I'm so fat," that's creating inflammation in your body.
Yeah.
And this might be woo-woo to some people, but I got to tell you, love and gratitude have made such an impact in my life. I practice love and gratitude. I look in the mirror every day and I tell myself I love myself. I practice gratitude, and I do something else that this might help people out there who are hurting because of something somebody did to them. And I'm not negating what happened to you in your situation at all. But something that I do is, I'll send love to people that are bothering me every morning. And I learned this from Bob Proctor. First of all, I'll think about something I do love so much. So my girlfriend, my dog, Brendan. I'll think about something I love, and I'll get that energy of love. And then I'll think about somebody who's bothering me at the moment. And it could be a hateful YouTube comment or something like that, or something somebody did to me in the past. And I'll transfer that love energy to that person, because I'm not doing it for them. I'm doing it for myself. Because if I kept thinking negative thoughts about that person, well, a universal law is that you get what you think about.
Yes.
Whatever you feed energy to comes right back to you. You know all about this. So if I think something, I don't even have to say it. If I'm thinking, "Oh, that person's a freaking asshole, screw him, screw her," that's going to come back to me. It might not come from that person or on that day, but you better believe it's going to come back to me. So what if I flipped it around and send love to that person? Well, that'll come back to me, and then I'll heal and I'll get a better life as a result. So this might be woo-woo, but I encourage you to try it out, to do it, not just try it, to do it and stick with it. And you're going to see that it's going to make a big difference for whatever diet philosophy you follow.
Absolutely. I know all the listeners of this show will eat that up, because literally our very first episode that we released was energy as medicine with a Reiki practitioner. So, we're a pretty woo-woo group, but that's the thing is, I am a very spiritual dude. I'm rocking the,
I love
all the time. But I'm not a woo-woo individual at all. I am very evidence-based, very science-based. And that's what's so exciting about these days. The science is there, the science of neuroplasticity, and how, one of my favorite phrases, thoughts become proteins. We always used to say thoughts become things, right? And it's like, well, yes, but more specifically and more scientifically, thoughts become proteins. The thoughts that we have, shape the neural networks. What we've really learned, and that's where like Dr. Joe Dispenza is doing a lot of amazing work within that realm, is we're really seeing like the gray matter is really not that much different than skeletal muscle. If we want big biceps, we specifically specific adaptation post demand. We put those fibers under tension, and that creates a demand for adaptation and developing further resilience. And so, same thing with those neurons. We shape our neural networks. We shape
Yep.
that neuroplasticity, and it all begins with our belief system. And the agreements that we form with ourselves and others. So that's where, like, have you read the Four Agreements?
Yeah. Yeah. I
Oh,
love that book. Yeah.
everybody needs to read that book.
Be impeccable with your language.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
yeah, be impeccable with your word. If you want to receive love, give love. If you want to receive respect, give respect. It is that universal law, and yeah, the science shows it. So it all starts that belief system to then program our body, program our physiology.
Yeah, exactly. And it's the awareness first and
Mhm.
foremost. It's the
Yeah.
awareness to know what's going on. If you have a negative thought, I kind of look at negative thoughts, as I learned this from Wayne Dyer, as like clouds that are passing through my brain. A negative cloud, just a whole bunch of lightning and rain that's saying, "Oh, you're not good enough to speak on stage at Paleo FX. You're not good enough to do this." And I'll observe it, and I'll say next.
Yeah.
And I'll see, oh, that's a better cloud. You're better you can do that. You've studied, you've done the work, you've helped so many people. And that's our greatest power, the power to choose our thoughts. So it could help us or it could absolutely destroy us. And for the first 24 years of my life, it destroyed me. It resulted in a very unhappy, depressed, suicidal life. And if I could go from being on the internet to looking for ways to kill myself, every single week I did that, to loving every single minute of my life and having the awareness to know that those thoughts have nothing to do with me, the negative thoughts
Mhm.
have nothing to do with me or my potential, and have everything to do with my paradigm, my conditioning, well, then you're in the driver's seat. There's nothing that could affect you. You are unmessable with. And I absolutely feel that way. And it's a work in progress, but I feel that way. And I'm able to master my thoughts because I've put in the work. Brendan has put in the work, but we don't stop putting in the work. We're
Right.
not just resting out on our laurels, because you know this. Nothing in the universe stays the same.
No.
This cup right here, it's moving at an accelerated rate. So you're either creating or you're disintegrating. So
Mhm.
nothing stays the same. Somebody who says, I wish everything just stays the same, is expressing their ignorance of how the universe works, because
Mhm.
you're either growing or you're not. You don't stay the same. So
Mhm.
it's important, like you said, to create a better story. Create a story that's
Mhm.
going to serve your future and make you a victor, not a victim.
Exactly. It's one of those, we are not our thoughts or emotions. We are the awareness behind them. And, we can shape our own destiny. We can influence our epigenetic expression. And it is that narrative, that belief system that you have the choice to make. So I think it's immensely powerful. And like you said, it's a continuous practice, and that's where honestly, I've been going through kind of a little bit of a challenging time lately. And I had a powerful experience recently where it was just like, oh my gosh, I didn't even realize how disconnected from my unconditional love practice I was. And like you said, it is a practice, you don't get in shape, work your ass off, get in shape, and then stop working out and expect to stay in shape.
Right.
It is that things are always catabolizing or anabolizing. We're growing, we're breaking down constantly. So it's the same thing with those neural networks. And unfortunately, in today's society, it's very easy to fall into those traps and very easy to get
Mm.
kind of that ego seduction of consumerism and toxic energy. So, but it's the power of the individual. We have that conscious choice, but we have to develop that awareness first. So something that I need to be better about, and that's, I'm not a hypocrite, I got to be better about it too. I like to start my day looking in the mirror and say, how will you practice unconditional love today? And when you're posing it as a question, you're kind of creating this subliminal, you're going to be working on that, like, I'm going to practice unconditional love today. Are you? That's a very certain statement. How are you going to do that? And then you start working on it, like, how am I going to practice unconditional love today?
I love that. Yeah, it's a great question to ask. I want to start doing that now.
It's like a bio. Can we start neurohacking? Is that a thing now? Let's make that a thing.
Yeah, you're making it a thing, and you're right when you said the odds are stacked against us with the mainstream media, with the school system. Let's face it, it's just negative information. If you're watching the news, if you're watching CNN, which stands for constantly negative news, you're going to think that the world is just so dangerous and everybody's out to get you, when in reality, I would say the world is 90%, 98% good. Everybody wants to do good. It's just that those 2% or 5% of bad people, whatever it is, they're so loud and so out there that it's scaring people to think that most people are bad, but most people are not bad. The world is not a dangerous place as a whole. It's a beautiful place. Humans are beautiful people. Community, as you said, is so important. If you look at, going back to community, if you look at the blue zones, right? People say, oh, blue zones, what do they all have in common? They have community. They are showing unconditional love, and there's something to be said for that. Mm-hmm. So we talked a lot about keto and fasting and all that, but you got to have the thoughts that are going to serve you. You got to have the people that you are unconditionally loving and unconditionally love you back. That's why I love my dog so much, who's sleeping right here, because they're a perfect example of unconditional love, right? They're just, no matter what, I come home, I could have a stressed day, my dog's going to love me. So I love how you talked about that, man. It's so important.
Absolutely. And just a fun joke, it's like if you were to lock your dog and your girlfriend in the garage all day while you go to work and then come back, who's going to be happier to see you when you get home?
That's good. Definitely.
Dogs know how to love unconditionally. Humans need to learn a thing or two from dogs, I suppose. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree about that.
Well, hey, I know you got to get going, as do I. But Brother Ben, first off, amazing conversation. You are a wealth of knowledge. I see all of your stuff, but being able to really just discuss in depth today, I'm blown away by your work. I think it's absolutely remarkable. And I think together we can make a dent in disease,
I know we are. And let's continue doing it, man. I love your work. For those of you listening to the podcast now, go listen to the episode I interviewed Brendan on my podcast, the Keto Camp podcast. Maybe you could put it in the show notes.
Yeah.
You did a fantastic job on there, and I was so blessed to have you, man, because you've mentored me over the years. When I went through FDN, you were my course mentor, and you really showed me a lot, man. I admire you and what you're doing, and you have a great community. You're out there, you're educating medical doctors, dude. You're educating these professionals with information that actually gets to the cause. So I love you, dude. I admire what you're doing, and I look forward to doing more collaborations with you.
Absolutely. We got that mirror thing going on, and that's where, the light in me acknowledges, recognizes, and honors and loves the light in you, So we're going to keep going. And yes, I'd love to include the link of your podcast that I was on, and also your keto camp and the 28-day jumpstart, because I get so many questions about keto all the time, and it's like, here you go. And like, this guy's got this down to beautiful science. So we'll be sure to include those. And again, thank you so much for your time. This was an amazing convo, and I know we'll both be at Paleo FX. Maybe we'll hang out sooner, but we'll definitely be sure to hang out at Paleo.
Yeah, come join us at Paleo FX if you're listening to this. And I had a great time today, man. What an important conversation. So thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you, man. And enjoy the rest of your day. I'm sure we'll talk soon, my friend.
We will, brother. Thank you.
All right. See ya.